Now, I know the Prepare series that we're in is talking about fulfilling the mission today, but I want to talk to you, and I love it when Pastor Scott invited me down, and Scott Stevens, who I now, he's my boss at this point. I still have a job. Many of you said, how's retirement going? I have to tell you, I don't know yet. When I get there, I'll let you know. But Scott Stevens said, you can preach about anything you want to. And as I wrestled with this, where I'm going today is what I think God wants you to hear from me to you as someone that's been here from the very beginning. I have to say, perhaps one of the most widely held, pervasive lies that the devil's managed to create in the minds of people is that their religion is a private thing. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and you try to begin to just broach the topic of faith and they say, look, I think religion's a private thing. Anyone ever hear that? Yeah, a lot of you. I want you to know, first of all, we don't follow a religion. We have a relationship that we're building upon. But that relationship is not a private one. It's a personal one, but it's something that we share with others. And we share it in the context of what's called community. The Christian life, especially the difference-making kind, not just the going through the motions kind, is meant to be lived out and together. You know, one of the highest values that I learned as a young Marine Corps officer, and I know my friend Dan Tellep is here, and he was a very serious Marine. I tried to be. But they basically tear you down to nothing so they can build you up the way they want you to be. Now, you're responsible for yourself, but a much more profound responsibility arises for the Corps because they know that their lives are going to depend on each other. I just want to say this in a way that I hope you'll get. That's the same thing with the Christian life. That sometimes God does tear you down. I was sharing with one of the folks after the first service who said, they've been going through some introspection over the last months. Sometimes God has to tear you down so that he can build you up for a greater purpose and a greater reason. And that's the essence, at least, of one of the reasons why we have community. Look on your outlines. I streamlined this to be so happy. All these other guys at the other campuses are preaching long sermons. Mine's only about an hour. So this is going to be pretty good. But the first thing is Christian community is biblical. So what we're sharing with you isn't some idea or philosophy or ideology that we stumbled across somewhere in Southern California where all holy people end up eventually. No, this is what we discovered when I joined, as Scott mentioned, with 8 other couples. Carol and I joined together, and we met almost every day for about 3 months, studying these passages of the Bible and saying, God, what would it look like if we could launch a true New Testament church? And I have to say, now 30-some years later, we realized we got it right on some things, and we realized that we're still working on some other things. But we began by studying this passage, and I want you to look on your notes. Just look at the scripture passage. This is the one we spent days talking about and praying about, and what does that mean to us? It reads like this. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And everyone was filled with awe. And many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to any who had need. Every day, get that? Every day, continued to meet together in the temple courts. There's a few teenagers saying, oh my gosh, every day I'd have to go to church. Well, they didn't see it that way. See, it was life to them. They broke bread in their homes. So right away you see, there's the essence of the model. We meet together. This isn't exactly a temple, but it'll do, right? I mean, it's got comfortable seats and all the things we need to communicate. But we also meet together in homes, just like they did in the early church. And now look what happened as a result. God, as they were praising him, they enjoyed the favor of all the people, and the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Now, Christian community, what made people do something this radical? I mean, think about what they did. These folks had been fearful and hiding. They were being persecuted. They were despised. The Roman government had their eye on them, and the Jewish people hated them. So what caused these people to do something this visible and public, that is, going into the temple courts? And also, believe me, they knew what homes they were meeting in. It was online. They just looked it up, where they had to go. And here's the thing. To me, it was two dynamically different things. One was that many of them had been eyewitnesses to the resurrection of a man who they had seen crucified, dead and buried. And then for 40 days, he walked around, just mingled with him. A dead man being alive. How many of you would say, I'd be interested in going to a church that saw that happen? Okay? Yeah, there's a little bit of demonstration of the power of God. So that was one thing that's undeniable. In fact, that's one of the main reasons, by the way, that's given by apologists as to the credibility of the Christian church and the resurrection. Only something like that could change people that dramatically. The other part is in Acts 2:40, which we won't take the time to look up, but that's where Peter says to rescue yourself from this corrupt generation. So in other words, they were told that things are crumbling around them in their culture, and they needed to be together. And I want to take a long sidetrack here, but I just want to say to you, submit to you to think about this. I want to submit to you, we are living in a corrupt generation. Things are going downhill in America in terms of the values that we hold and treasure. I was reading an article just recently by a man by the name of Josh McDowell. If you know that name, it's likely from his previous teaching. Some of you here are as old as I am and might remember him as being somebody who oftentimes would confront atheists and unbelievers in debates and so on. He wrote the book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and then the book More Than a Carpenter. And he was a very well-known figure, but he still, to this day, is respected and teaches at major conferences, but he's changed his focus now to one thing, and I want you to hear this. This is related to the culture. He is seeing the potential for the destructive power of the internet unmonitored and unchecked in your homes. And it's not the purpose of my message to talk about this, but every parent hearing me, and grandparent for that matter, needs to understand that your young ones must have some sort of internal filter that keeps them from going to places they shouldn't be on the web. Josh McDowell said it this way. I thought it was profound. He said, now in my conversations, I've discovered that 11 and 12-year-olds are seeing images, involved in conversations, and doing things that sophomores and juniors in college did just 2 decades ago. And I want to tell you, an 11 or 12-year-old, they are not prepared in their heart to do those things. Did you hear about the one girl that took her own life because she was being bullied on the internet by 2 other girls? I mean, these are very important things. So parents, as we offer opportunity to train you on what you can do, please avail yourself of that. And if you have a particular issue, share with Pastor Scott or the team here. They will give you some hints as to what you can do. This is a corrupt generation, and I think it's just going to get worse. Why? Because the church is being marginalized more and more and more. Unless one thing happens, and that one thing would be that the church begins to take the shape of what it was in the New Testament, and then we're going to have favor with the people, and God's going to keep sending us more and more. And I want to say it now, and this is what you can put down now. You're going to see great blessing in this next year, on this campus, in this church, because the word is out there. See, in this non-retirement that I'm in, I have more time to listen to people talk And you know what? A couple, 3 years ago, there wasn't any buzz out in the community about this church. Oh, I heard you started, but not much else. But now I'm hearing positive things about what's going on. Don't you have a church in Sewickley Valley? Yeah, we do. I've heard things are really happening there. Lives are being changed. They are being changed. Pastor Scott's going to mention something this coming Thursday night when some people are going to be water baptized. I want to put a word of encouragement in. Don't miss that. You might hear something that night that just grips you. Even if you've been water baptized, still come and support those and listen to their stories. Because great things are happening in this church. Look what these people they were like. They were devoted, says in verse, that section I read, 42 through 47. They met every day in the temple courts and in homes. They prayed. They shared their stuff together. And trust me, we worked through all those things. What would that look like? We even thought, literally, when we started, about buying a farm property somewhere on the way to Zelienople, and maybe having a sort of a communal living situation. And realized, no, we're not called to be isolationists. We're called to be in the world, but not of it. And so that's the route that we've chosen. And we have been faithful to pursue that. Not perfectly, but we've been faithful to pursue it now for 32 plus years. So I want to ask you today, do you understand that the church is not all about its rigid kind of governmental infrastructure? It's not all about the bulletin being right. Some of you, if you're new, or maybe you've been coming despite the fact, it just drives you crazy that there's no order of worship. You don't know what's coming next. I was in the bathroom, and Scott mentioned my name last time to come up, because I didn't have a bulletin. And I thought I had another 5 minutes. But fortunately, I made it in, and things, that's just the way it is, right? I mean, we kind of know what's going to happen, but we're not here to tell God what's to happen. How many of you want God just to be able to do what he wants to do when we're together, right? I mean, this is a unique opportunity, having more than 100 and some people gathering together. And if we start coming expecting God to do some things, lives get changed big time and dramatically in these kinds of gatherings. Notice the different metaphors that are used. I could have added another 15 to this, but I just chose 5 or 6 that I think were particularly pointing to the organic and changing nature of the church. It's referred to as a family, as a bride, and think of the splendor and the glory and the beauty of a bride, as branches on a vine, i.e. connected to a source of some kind and producing a fruit that's pleasing, a field of crops, that is, they are out there making a difference, giving back into the culture and the society. And as a body, that's in my estimation, the most common reference to what the church is. A body whose head is, answer? Take a wild guess. Whose answer is Jesus, of course. Jesus is the head, and we are his body in this earth. And you start to see yourself, wow, it's not, it's rigid. And here, let me just take a little test. How many of you drove past one church to get here today? Okay, that's almost everybody. How many of you drove past 3 churches? Again, great, about 5. Yep. You know, some of you can't even count. I mean, maybe you drove in from, Wilkes-Barre, and it was a 4-hour drive, or Youngstown, I don't know. But most all of us went by churches that have good people in them, but they don't have the presence of God amongst them, and there's no life there. Because they were clinging to a particular ideology or sort of, the structure, the letter, if you will. Friends, if you get a little timeline chart. It's interesting. The oldest denomination that broke out in the Protestant Reformation was about 450 years ago. So all these churches that you passed, they've, at best, have only been here 450 years or so. This that we're talking about is 2,000 years old. And that's why we found it best to go right to the source. Again, there's nothing wrong with those churches. I think there's some wonderful people. I just wish that there were different things. And just so you know, I felt it was important. So I was baptized as a Roman Catholic. My great-great-grandfather, who founded the hospital and 26 other institutions that you don't know about in Western Pennsylvania, was Lutheran. I was trained and then ordained in the United Presbyterian Church, not one of the offshoots, but the real one, the UPUSA. And I've been the pastor of an independent body of believers for 32 years. So I figure if I stand in heaven and I'm in the wrong line to get in because it was Lutheran, oh, no, not really, you should have been Presbyterian, I'm covered, right? I'm good. I've got all my bases covered. But how many of you know that's not the way it's going to be in heaven? The Lord is not going to ask you, what denomination were you part of? Oh, this part of your doctrine was wrong. Friends, let's get our head up and realize people from every tongue and nation and tribe, every part of the world will be together as one when we stand before the Lord because of Jesus. So it's not about denominations, and it's not about finding fault with them. We're not at war with any of them. We love them all. In fact, we just bought one of their buildings in Dormont and have a relationship with those folks, and we're going to be starting another campus, another place. And the reason we're doing it this way is, in essence, we're doing it this way because this enables you to engage your neighbors and friends in your area with your church. You don't have to drive 30 minutes one way or more, because you might have liked that. In fact, I just want to commend it. I know some of my friends that are here today that were glad that I was here to preach. And after 30-some years of knowing me, we're still friends. But we decided to start these churches in these different campuses and locations because it was easier for you to reach out to your neighbors and friends and say, hey, come and see what's happening here. Not, buy an RV and take the trip with us out to Wexford. Well, that's not so much true here in Sewickley. I think I got here in 18 minutes. I'm sorry, Lord. It was actually more like 22 minutes. And that was from North Park. So, yeah, it was really pretty quick. But there are folks that come, I know I've met a couple of folks that you live way out in like Oakmont and places like that, and Oakdale. And, to ask someone like that to come out to Wexford, that's a short plane ride. So this is why we do it the way we do it. And I want you to see that this whole thing of community starts with understanding it's a biblical idea. But as part of it, the tough thing is when I have to give you sort of the other side of it, no matter what, true community, second on your outline, is costly. Let me get into this for just a second. It costs your time, your priorities, your preferences, and back then it even cost your stuff. And we've talked about the fact that sometimes you have to give some of your stuff so that some others can have some things that they desperately need. I so commend Minnie and the team that met on Compassion Day and made a difference. That's what community does. It doesn't just sit there with a flag and say, we're a community. It represents itself. And trust me, people notice. People say, well, why did they come together? What were they doing? They notice it. You know what I should have put on here? I listed there's 34 one another's in the Greek New Testament. I just picked out 5. Look at them. In fact, I'd like you to read them and just say them, see if they sound the same to you. Say them with me. Love one another, submit to one another, carry one another's burdens, serve one another, and accept one another. Now, how many of you find that easy to do, all of those? No hands went up. And I wanted to put and should have put here, forgive one another. Because every one of us, from time to time, needs to be forgiven. Or else we start to put up masks and we hide our true selves. And that is not good. That is not the essence of community. And friends, sadly, some people are hurt or misunderstand, and they don't tell you, and they think that they're going to hold you hostage. I had someone stop me at the end of the baton passing service exactly 2 years ago when Pastor Scott Stevens became the lead pastor. And we were gathered in the lobby. If you've ever been to the Wexford campus, we have a big lobby and atrium. And a person kind of waited around as the crowd thinned out, and they came up and said, well, Pastor Jay, now that you're officially gone, which I wasn't, but they thought so, they said, I need to ask your forgiveness. And I said, I have no idea why, what it's about. And then here's what they said. They said 12 years ago, I saw you meeting with some folks in a group, and I came over, and you were greeting everybody and talking, and you never mentioned my name. You never connected with me. And I thought that day, this person said to me, that I wasn't good enough to be in one of your groups or one of your friends. So I've been angry and bitter at you for the last 12 years. How heartbreaking is that? I didn't know that. How easily fixable is that? If they would have just come up to me, I would have said, I am so sorry, you're right. I did not notice that you were part of that group, and I didn't take the time to recognize you. It says in Hebrews 12:15, don't let a root of bitterness grow up in you and spoil what's in your heart. I mean, it's essential. And sometimes we don't even know it. We don't even know we offended others. So it's important that you grab hold of that. Community is costly. Scott mentioned the fact that for 16 months we met. Prior to your ever being here, we envisioned it in our hearts and in our minds that something like this would happen. And it wasn't easy. Because we were coming from different parts, people had jobs, but we met faithfully, and that was my most important word, faithfully for 16 months. By the way, we were rejected 4 different times by other institutions where we just said, could we rent some space from you? And they would go and find some of the most obscure regulations that they could, or they'd write one up that they could put in so that we weren't allowed to meet in their space. Until we came finally to this location, and this is just the beginning. This is not the end. This is just a temporary place. The real church, friends, is not a building. Amen? The real church is the people. You're the church. It's a living organism. And just like a real building, a physical building can be expensive, it can be expensive to live life in community. It can be really expensive. You might, and when I say in community, I don't just mean calling this community. Because when you have 100 or more people, you can't know everybody in this room. It has to break down into a smaller group, right? I mean, it has to be a group of maybe 8 or 10 or 12. And you've got to meet regularly with that group and be willing to, over time, open up your hearts. Now, I know for some of you, you're not ready for that, you think. But I'm here to say, if you'll let Pastor Scott and the team here know that you're interested, just interested, they'll help you find a group that sort of fits you. And then your responsibility then is just to visit the group. Everyone say visit. Visit is not the same as join. So here in Northway, it's like a health club. Come and check it out. Come a couple of times. Realize that, hey, this is really for me or it's not. Everyone who leads a group knows that people might want to come check. And so maybe you come and everyone in the group there is over 50 and you say, I don't want to be with a bunch of old people. Because I have 6 kids and you don't have any. I mean, they're all grown up. So, okay, you have a nice visit. Trust me, they're not going to say anything nasty. It won't appear online. Nobody's going to write a Facebook comment about it. No. Just try it. And by the way, when we dismiss here shortly, before you run out, maybe turn back to that person that you introduced yourself to a few moments ago and just say, hey, by the way, we're kind of new too, or we've not met. Our group meets, and just tell them when you meet and ask them would they want to come and visit your group. It's okay. I'm going to give you authority. In fact, I'm going to appoint you as the representative of your small group to invite someone else to it. Because small groups are not meant to be this little club that never changes. It's supposed to be inclusive. And all it takes is a simple invitation. And I know sometimes getting those words out is hard. And I know sometimes there are people in that group, when I say costly, there are people, and how many of you would be honest enough to say, maybe not in your current group, but you've been in groups where you thought, if that person shows up, I'm going home. Pastor Scott has his hand up. That was the way it was with us early on. If we're really honest, friends, that's life, okay? I remember telling Carol once or twice after group meetings that, I've got to talk to, because when they start talking, it's like they think they're the only ones there. And eventually you look around and everybody's head's bobbing, kind of like in a boring sermon, and this person's still talking and doesn't realize it. Well, you got to accept one another, but you also need to be sensitive and help that to work out. It's costly, but not too much. The blessings far outweigh the cost. All these one another's, there's so many others that talk about the favor, the blessing, the grace, the encouragement. All these things happen in the context of small groups. And that's what gets the mission done. Now the final point in your outline. Christian community is powerful. Look just at verse 47 there on the top of the page. The people were praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Not many churches can say that. And I want that to be said of this church, that you're enjoying the favor of the people. In other words, people speak well about you and the impact that you're having. And God is adding daily to their numbers those who are being saved. And trust me, friends, even today, someone is going to start down that path of salvation. The difference between religion and relationship. Religion is just man's attempt to try to get in favor with God. Relationship with Jesus is recognizing that he paid a debt for you that you could never pay. And that is the price of forgiveness of your sins. He purchased that on the cross for you. And by the way, one of the other reasons why a lot of people aren't in communities, some pastors are afraid to talk about it. So they just leave it out. I remember talking to our business administrator back more than 10 years ago, who had just come from a meeting with some other business administrators from other churches. And they introduced themselves, and when he said, I'm from Northway, someone just verbally said, oh, you're from that really serious church. Well, if serious means, yeah, we're following the Bible and trying to do the things that it says to do in there, how many of you would vote, yeah, I'm serious? I mean, think of the opposite. What's the opposite? If I'd have been there, I'd say, okay, no, tell me, what is the good opposite of not serious? Yeah, casual would be a compliment. We are serious because it's powerful and lives get changed. I want you to hear from Pastor Scott. He's been my friend and a brother for all these years. By the way, I want to say to all of you who I've known for decades, thank you for coming today. You could have said it's Jay. I don't know. I've heard everything he has to say. Scott could say that. But I want him to come and share with you some specific ways the community has changed his life. Please listen. This is a good man, and he has experienced some great things through community. So share your heart, brother.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, community is powerful, and I know you know that, but Jay asked me if I would just share a few of my personal experiences with that reality. So I thought of a whole lot, but so it was actually hard to whittle it down to a few. But one of my first recollections was it was over 30 years ago as the community was forming. I was in business. I was working in a business, and attended the church like most of you do. And one of the first things that happened is I plugged in to a very small group of men who were meeting. And Jay happened to be there, and we met in small groups to pray together. I would frequently do that throughout the week. And as a result, those first few years of entering into community, God used that, and God used you in particular, Jay, to cause me or allow me to literally change careers and get on a whole different track, which a few years later had me in full-time pastoral ministry, which was some 28 years ago. So community was the umbrella, as it were, around me, covering me, that God used to literally change my career. 3 years ago, when this community formed, I was over in Wexford. I had been there 25 years. I knew what to do in a large church like the campus in Wexford. I was comfortable there, maybe too comfortable. And I was happy for what was happening in Sewickley Valley, but I had no idea that a year later I would be over here. So a couple of years ago, when I got the call to come over here, I said, well, we'll pray about it. I knew if I said no, that was probably not good. But we came over. And so here's what happened. We discover you. I found out what a loving community this was. Your commitment, we didn't know 2 years ago. If this community, and I won't go into the details of the story, but we went through a leadership transition. We didn't know if Sewickley Valley could make it. But I found a resilience here and a commitment to one another and to God that was very attractive. And then very significant was the acceptance in this community. Missy and I felt so loved and accepted that a year ago we moved here. I said, I know it's only a 20 or so, for me it's like a half hour to get over here. How do you get here in 22 minutes? But we wanted to be here with you. So I am in ministry because of community. We live in a different place because of community. And then probably the most significant thing is a story I've never shared with you that I know of. But about 10 years ago, our family hit bottom. And don't think your family can't hit bottom. Ours did. Many people didn't know what we were going through, but we discovered that one of our children was struggling with a number of addictions and health issues. And they were serious, and they were life-threatening. And I don't know what I would have done without community. I turned immediately to the lifeline of our counseling center, and my brother John Size over there, and Mark Hutchison, and others who discerned. I can remember the moment they discerned our son's condition. Our family, I liken families to groups of people who are in boats going down streams or rivers. And you kind of know that about me, don't you? Life is messy. And life isn't supposed to be lived on the good ship, whatever. It's just not going to be that way. It's really going to be wild sometimes. We'll go through rapids. Every one of our family, and we have 7, were out of the boat. We were out of our proverbial boat. We were in the water, splashing around, looking for hope. And our family was kind of disintegrating. But God used the resources of this community, which didn't exist 20 years ago, but they existed then and they exist today. So I can't tell you how thankful I am for what you're calling the power of community. It's literally been life to us. Thanks, Jay.
Right, and thank you, Scott. Thanks for. I don't know if I hope that encourages you. That your pastor is a real person who has real struggles, just like all of you do. And we don't go around with a big emblem on, and he's not looking for sympathy. He's just sharing with you that he's on a journey just like you are. You can be yourself here and be accepted. That's the message. And then grow from that point on to the next. And by the way, I've had people say, well, I don't want to get in a small group if it means I'm going to end up being a full-time minister. And that was, Scott was the absolute exception on that. But I will tell you, Carol's here to verify this, within 2 weeks of knowing Scott, I knew that he was going to end up leaving that $300,000 a year job. Community is powerful. When you pray with each other consistently for something, 8 or 10 or 12 of you, when you believe together for something, and you join your faith, when you grow in your confidence that God's amongst you, friends, I'm just telling you, it changes you. And good things will happen. The people around you who don't know much about it will start to ask questions, and God will add to your number. Those who are being saved. One of the things I get to do right now is to be out in the community at large around the city of Pittsburgh. And when God starts to move with favor, and that's what I'm saying is going to be happening in this community here in Sewickley Valley, when God starts moving, all you have to do is find a way to keep putting up more chairs. You don't have to drag. You don't have to publicize. You just need to make room. And I'm finding right now a whole new segment of people in Pittsburgh that are making a difference in their spiritual lives. And guess what? They're Roman Catholic. Anybody here have some Roman Catholic background? By the way, nearly 40% of our churches are made up of folks who were either formerly Roman Catholic or had at least some relationship with the Catholic Church. I'm finding that there are incredibly passionate Catholic men and women who love Jesus the way we love him and know him, but have been called by Jesus to stay in their church and be a witness to other Catholics. Because they realize that many of the Catholics that go to their churches just simply go through these liturgies they don't understand and don't have a relationship. And so they're committed to staying there. But is it exciting? I'm actually having to plan for coffees and lunches weeks out with just Catholic people. And I'm not trying to convert them into Protestantism. We're just talking about Jesus and what's happening there. And I'm here to tell you, 70% of the greater Pittsburgh area is Roman Catholic. How many of you believe that if the Protestants and the Catholics got together on some things, this city would notice? Do you believe that? Well, I'm just going to say this again publicly. It's going to be happening. There's a little event coming up on the 13th of November up at the Wexford campus, and I'm having to put together. I already have half my registrants are Roman Catholic. I'm excited about that because, see, in the eyes of Jesus, it's one church, and he knows our hearts, and he knows that we've got some things that aren't exactly right, and so do they. But boy, is it exciting to see those people responding. The other thing that happens in a group that's powerful and positive, I could spend all the time talking about the positives, but one of them is that you usually do end up making a particularly strong bond with one or two people. In my group, which, by the way, Carol and I have been part of a small group all 32 plus years, I don't believe in telling people to do something and not doing it yourself. So we've been going to weekly groups for 32 plus years. Not the same one, but it's changed a little bit. My most recent group, I ride a bike out in North Park to try to stay somewhat in shape. And I invited one of the guys in my group, there's a picture, a couple months back, and he'd never been on a bicycle, but he was very mechanical, I found out, way more than I am, and he could tune and make things work, and he's very competitive. And we would start together riding, and at first, I was clearly a little more experienced, but boy, he just got into it. And now we sort of just jockey back and forth. It's kind of like when Pastor Scott and I used to play tennis, and I'd play around with him and then usually finish him off at the end. That's sort of what I know he has another shot coming, so but that's what it is with Dennis. But here's the most important point. See, Dennis and I will say to each other, when we were going up that hill, if you hadn't been right there, I would have stopped, or I would have turned around. Or, if we say, let's do one more lap, we'll always say, you know what, if you hadn't been there, I would have put the bike back up in the rack and gone home. But your being there brought the best out in me. And friends, it does that with you in small groups as well. It brings out it causes you to go a step further, to reach a little higher, to become a little bit more than you were. And then when that happens, well, you realize it's too good to keep to yourself. So we added somebody. I want you to notice that most of the guys I ride with have shorter legs than I do. It's part of my strategy. That's called, and by the way, this is going to be a formal rolling out probably in the spring. We're going to call it, anyone who wants to be a cyclist, the Northway Chain Gang. And we'll have more information about how you can join the chain gang. And we're going to do rides together, and we're going to have opportunity to bless other people together. But see, that group now has grown. And that gentleman in the blue jersey comes all the way down from Butler to ride. It takes him longer to get there than it does to ride, but he wants so much to be part of that. And so what's interesting is the other guy in the white jersey, the one I ride with regularly, we talk about everything spiritually and everything that's going on at work and everything that's going on. We share life together. That's what community does. So let me just end with this. Where are you when it comes to this community business? Have you just heard this and heard small groups are good, but you know what, I can't, I'm so tired when I come home from work, or yeah, but I'm not that serious yet, or whatever it might be. I want to leave today with a word of loving encouragement. Don't miss out on potentially the most important component of your spiritual journey. You are a member of the body of Christ if you know Jesus. The only question is, are you in community? Are you being reinforced and encouraged? Are you accountable to someone when you maybe are slipping up and having difficulty? Do you know where you would turn if something happened? Last evening I was at another church, which I can do now that I'm retired. No, I'm not retired. I went anyhow. I heard Aaron Smith give his testimony, which I've heard before because I've interviewed him before. But Aaron shared last night that when their fourth child didn't get over a common cold very easily, and then they discovered that that child didn't have just the common cold, but had an aggressive form of leukemia. He shared last night what it meant to him to have his small group come around him. See, here's the thing. If you're waiting for something to motivate you, it may be too late to help you when the time comes. Be prepared now. Aaron Smith said they became our lifeline. They brought in meals. They prayed for us. They helped clean our house. They did all these different things because we were so absorbed in caring for our little one and helping him to get better. And I'm happy to say now he's 2 years into his remission, and there's no evidence of cancer in this little guy, and they're so blessed to share that. So what about you, Sewickley Valley? There'll be a Connect event now and then that formally invites you, and those are great. But it's just as easy to turn to somebody that, you look at them and you say, I wonder if they're in a group. And just say, I don't really know you, but I'm so-and-so, and do you have a group? And if they say, well, no, not yet, well, then invite them. Just come and visit. Simple as that. I give you permission to do that. And then watch and see what happens as God adds to your groups and life begins to change. You will become a person. I cannot imagine the Christian life without being in community, because that's what it is. Northway Christian Community, Sewickley Valley. By the way, someone wanted to ask me, why don't you call yourselves a church? Why isn't it Northway Church? I want to hear the word church. Are you really a church? Are you a club? I mean, I've heard so many things. But when we wrestled way back in 1981 with what to call ourselves, the Lord made it clear to call ourselves a community, because that's what we were to be. And it would be obvious to people that we were a church. I've reminded God that he didn't get that part right. People aren't sure because you don't say church. That gives you the opportunity to define church for them. Well, we call ourselves a community because that's one of our highest priorities. But yes, we're a church in every sense of the word. We're a church that loves, honors, cares for, encourages, forgives, heals, does all those things together. That's what God has for you. And that's what he wants you to be, an ambassador to the community at large about community in Christ Jesus. Let's stand together.